Today you're going to join me into the favorite part of my day, going into the conference room with my glasses on to review all the contracts that Pearland Title and Escrow has received in the last 24 hours. Especially what I want to do is spot any issues in the next 72 hours that can create a problem and a pitfall in a transaction and teach you how to spot them right away, 72 hours. Well, the time of the day. We have received 12 contracts, and I'm not going to have time to go over each one of them today, but I will grab, let's take this one. So we have received the contract, and in this file, it is a cash deal. So the first thing that I want to do is to see who the seller is. And in this particular one, we have a contract in which we have an entity as the seller and we have an individual as the buyer. What I want to do is to go into Sunbiz right away and see that the person that executed the contract really had the authority to bind this LLC into entering into a contract. And number one, I see an individual being a buyer. But what gets my attention is that I know that this particular individual is a foreign national. So the second thing that I am going to do is reviewing if this contract can or cannot be assigned. Because my good feeling is that probably this person is going to assign this contract into an LLC as well. So step number one is I'm going to see whether this contract will be closing under an LLC and making sure that an assignment of contract is entered into promptly. Why? Because I also see that there is an association. So this particular condominium requires an approval, and the approval needs to be issued under the name of the LLC. Number two, I also see that we have a foreign client, and I see 3 days for delivery of the escrow money. We need to call the realtor and we need to call the buyer. The realtor already knows that if this is a foreign client, usually wire transfers take over 72 hours to be received. So either that time for delivery of the escrow letter is extended, or we notify all the parties that that transaction and that wire needs to come from my US bank account. Then we're going to go into our title search and our tax and lien search and etc. But those are the first 2 steps that I need to take into consideration. Another file that we received, which also caught my attention, is I have here a seller that I know for a fact that is a foreign national. And I know this particular seller will not be able to come into the US. Therefore, I need to see if this seller can go to a US consulate in his country. Call it the embassy because it's the consular services, the ones that have the authority to notarize documents. If not, we need to, this particular one, and I know it's a client from Argentina, if what we call un escribano is going to be able to notarize the seller's documents. And lastly, knowing in which city that person is at, seeing if we can pursue what we call a RON closing, remote online notarization. This particular client does not have a social security number. Therefore, there is no KBA, which is an analysis that is done when we do a RON with a Florida notary. So we need to ascertain that in this particular case, a RON approval with a Virginia closing can be done and authorized by our underwriter. To doing so, there is a process. So rather sooner than later, we need to make sure that this closing can be performed through a RON notary. We just got the contract, we need to ascertain that. This particular file is a finance transaction. Since this transaction is going to be financed, I am trying to make sure that my buyer has promptly applied for a loan, because it is here not clear whether this is a pre-approval letter or not. We need to make sure that this client has promptly applied for a loan. And I also see an association. Hey, we need to call and let the realtor know, remember, in this contract, you have 5 days to submit an application. And guess what? Once again, this contract will probably be assigned to an LLC. We need to remind the clients that once they submit the application, they need to let the association know that this contract will be further assigned to an LLC, because I need to see that approval under the name of the LLC. We will continue to review, but we will give you part 2 of going through the contracts. And what I'm trying to do is to avoid any pitfalls and any mistakes that can cause a problem 2 days prior to the closing.